have with us Ashutosh Srivastava, CEO of GroupM Asia Pacific, who's on his first India visit since the pandemic. Hello, Mr. Srivastava, and thank you for joining us here.
Thank you for inviting me.
As per the GroupM forecast for 2022,
Yes.
I think digital will emerge as the largest medium in 2020. This year. So, with an estimated share of 45% of the ADEX. Now, tell me, what is the percentage of revenue that GroupM kind of gets from digital media?
That's more than half of our revenue now.
Okay.
Yeah, because there is that many, we can loosely call it digital, and what you're looking at is split of the money that is spent by advertisers. But if you look at the business in terms of revenues, there's a lot more work done within the digital domain. So obviously that share is higher than just the share of billing, and it's well beyond the half of our business now.
Yeah, that's nice. And what is the kind of estimates for the next 2-3 years?
That it will continue to grow. We've all seen, and there is massive complexity within that ecosystem, and it's also evolving. It's, as you can see, virtually every marketer has built e-commerce capabilities. So it's now the whole quest is to find, trace a consumer through the entire sort of journey of decision making, from the time they feel they need to buy something to actually buying it. And you can track it on the digital platforms far more easily. There are challenges, of course, because people don't do everything on one platform, right? They may see an ad on one platform and they may buy on another platform, and currently these are all separate, what you call walled gardens, right? So that brings a lot of complexity as to how to piece together that journey, because you want to do the right things for the brand at each stage, so that the consumer experience is easy and frictionless. Once they decide to buy something, you should be able to track it and see whether what you're doing is working or not working. So that also adds complexity, right? So all the more, I would say, need for agency services in the market to work with the marketers to solve some of these challenges. So it's exciting times.
Do you feel traditional media will have to expand with its digital extensions for it to be relevant in the coming year? We have something like connected TVs today, we have digital OOH. What else can we look at in the coming year?
I think they're all evolving anyway, right? So yes, they may have been traditional media companies, but the core of the business is creation of content, right? The war is how to get people to watch my content versus someone else. So when you say traditional, it's the platform which is traditional, not the content, right? And the battle is really around the content. So everyone is discovering new platforms or multiple platforms to make sure that people are watching the content in which they have invested in, right? So for professionally produced video content, for instance, you've already seen massive growth in OTT platforms, because all the broadcasters clearly know, and they use it in different ways, right? So it's not just a replica of television, it has its own unique ways in which people can become more engaged. So that is one sort of development which is going on. If you look at the news publishers, traditionally you had the TV news channels and you had the newspapers. But again, mobile is ubiquitous everywhere. So how do you get people, but in mobile you won't read it like you'd read a newspaper, right? Or sit in front of a TV to watch. So how to refashion and repurpose that content on mobile and keep them hooked on to the brand. Again, at the end of the day, it's also interesting, the content is all powerful, but the credibility for that content comes either from years of legacy of producing excellent content, which means there is a brand behind it, right? So there is a Z, or there is a Disney, or there is a Star, or there's a Times of India, whatever, there is a brand. And in each case, there is some credibility that has been over years with the brand. So keeping the brand in focus for people so that they know that this content is credible and must be good is still a massive task. So they have to still market themselves across all the different platforms. But equally, I think adapting the content to each platform's characteristics. And you can see that going on in real time. And this is not there's no one line you can draw, because all these formats and channels keep evolving. Right? So so far it was pretty much what you would call a two-dimensional experience on a mobile screen or a tablet or a physical newspaper or the TV screen. But now with even newer technologies coming in, people can have a more immersive experience. Now, right now it's small and at the top end of the consumer sector. I'm talking here about what people call the metaverse, for instance, or augmented reality or virtual reality through headsets. Now, that's very small today, but people are playing with it because they need to be there as well, right? So all smart content creators have already realized this. So you can now see a huge rush. You go to Rahman today, or go to Ilayaraja, or go to all the prolific content creators in India, artists, for instance, they have straight away jumped onto this bandwagon. How do I monetize my content better, right? So earlier, traditionally, they would go to do a live concert, or they would tie up the rights with a broadcaster, or or sometimes produce a movie. But now, with the rise of Web 3.0, they have to create their own presence there as well. Right? So people can go and watch, listen, pay. Fans can, fans collect so many collectibles from all that.
Get a piece of them.
So there's a huge new economy developing there. Right? And again, it's early days, but the excitement is that you go and experiment, learn, and see how it goes. So, which is why I'm saying that there is no sort of line you can draw and say, okay, now I must do this. Each day brings new things.
Okay. You spoke about content. I also want to touch upon creativity. I remember in 2016, Mindshare had come up with the six-pack band.
Yes.
And you won the Class Grand Prix in Cannes.
Yeah.
Now today, in this era, are more and more brands coming to you and trying to go beyond planning and buying capabilities? I mean, is creativity no more the domain of creative agencies today?
Well, everyone is creative, right? I mean, if I step back and look at ourselves, WPP positions itself as a creative transformation company, right? Because there are many, you've got all the big consultancies which work with clients to help guide them on how they should reorganize themselves for the digital age, which is at an enterprise level, right? But the collection of agencies that sit within a group such as ours basically build their reputation on creativity, right? As opposed to creating beautiful frameworks for thinking and organizing of information and all that, which is what the big consultancies do very well. Right? So this is more about how do I come up with different exciting new ideas. That's what makes us different, right? So one can argue in the traditional world there was a creative agency and then there is a media agency and all that, but in today's day and age, I think creativity is the job of everyone who works in any of the companies in WPP, because you can be creative about the way you use technology. You can be creative about the way you dig out new insights from consumer behavior. You can be creative about how you create that experience, right? You can be creative about the content, which was the traditional domain which used to sit in the so-called creative agencies, right? So there's creativity in every aspect of, so the whole area of marketing is transforming because of this huge impact of technology. And now every aspect, whether it's in media, whether it's in content creation and distribution, there's scope for doing things in surprising, new, more engaging ways with consumers for everyone. So that is the guiding thought or the guiding principle. What we want to be known as is the most creative place to work in, right, for people. So every action has to be driven by that.
You mentioned this, and I wanted to say that in 1980s, I think we saw the decoupling of creative and media. Do you ever see us go back to that era, where there's a 15% commission for media and creative combined? Because we're talking about consolidation in every way.
Yeah, I mean, those things now don't have any meaning, right? Because billing doesn't really capture, or the total amount of marketing spend doesn't really capture all the work that is done. A lot of it is in activities which create or design solutions which are not necessarily billing. Right? So that 15% commission and getting together, that's a traditional construct. A modern construct is, here is my challenge for the brand, I'm at this stage in the marketplace, these are the things I'm facing, and you pick and choose different domain experts who can just come together as a sort of a network team, right? And they're orchestrated by someone who has really broad knowledge of the modern marketing business, working with clients on those briefs. So you build teams to purpose, and once that challenge is solved, they go back to doing other things. Right? So it's a far more fluid structure rather than saying creative. As it is, there is no such thing as creative and media agencies in the old sense of the word. Right? It's simply looking at different ways of engaging consumers. Some are looking at creating the communication, some are looking at finding where they are and how to target them, some are looking at how to distribute it in a way, some are looking at technology to see how to make it a really compelling experience. So you have to bring all these skills together to solve a brief to make it really stand out. Right? So and that will change from brief to brief. So which is why I said it's fluid and flexible. Pick and choose the best of the talent who have the experience to solve that brief and get them to work together. So it requires new skills, for instance, even among the leaders of these businesses, right? The old traditional control and command hierarchical structures and departments are only meaningful today to the extent of, okay, so I work on performance marketing or I want to specialize in search because I want to be the best person in this domain, right? That's a functional skill building. But for actually doing your day-to-day work, you probably work as part of a multifunctional team, what a lot of marketers or agencies call integration. Right? But that is the nature of the work. So I wouldn't put the old boundaries into a new way of working. I would define it as fluid, flexible, based on the task which has been given by the brand.
Okay. In that case, I'd like your view on something. I think WPP and GroupM's favorite person, Mr. Martin Sorrell, said. He regularly talks about how the holding company structures will fall apart. How complex structures are not what the client wants. They want simple integrations. What is your view on that?
Yeah, well, he created those and found it difficult to dismantle them. But what has happened over the last 3-4 years is a lot of refocusing, as you've seen within the organization, of if the creative agencies lack the digital or technological expertise, those were merged and brought together, right? Typically under the leadership of some of the digital agencies. The media agencies themselves have gone through massive transformation. The fact that we had a company like Essence bought and put into GroupM. Now, traditionally, again, as you know, the legacy model of the agencies was if there's a problem, throw people at problems and solve them. So, but for a company like Essence, it was how do you create the technology and the automation to solve a problem and to scale things, right? So the whole mindset or DNA is like a platform rather than as an agency. So these are the kind of skills that have been brought into our world. And obviously, and you would have seen Christian Jule's interviews in the past where he talks about us becoming more like a software company in that sense, right? Because here it's about scaling and automating and making sure that the execution of the delivery is largely driven by technology, right? The creativity and the thinking and designing a solution is still people-based, right? Those two are, but we have to get both of them right. We can't throw people at both problems and try and solve them. There are different skills required here. So why I'm bringing this up is that the old holding company model is a financial listed entity which is consolidating results of thousands of agencies, right? And then telling its shareholders and the world that we are bigger than the next one. So that game is of course gone. It's firstly there has been some mergers. Secondly, what I just mentioned to you, assembling talent. So if I look at our top 30 clients around the world, there are SWAT teams which are really different skills. So it can be people who are really good at designing consumer experience, people who are really good at commerce, people who are really good at organizing data and implementing technology, people who are really good at excellence on execution on different media platforms, your Facebook, Google, all the OTT platforms. There are people who are really good at creating stories in all formats, not just television of the old, but creating those beautiful, compelling stories for brands to tell consumers through all the different modern platforms as well, right? So, and that design requires a very different approach.
Right.
So, in each of these, it's so when a brand comes with a brief, you basically look at what aspect of this problem do I need. Are they struggling to draw people to their sales channel or to their website from where they're selling directly to consumer? Are they not able to drive people to a physical retail footfall? Where is the breakage in the journey? right? So therefore you bring the, okay, maybe this is because we don't have good first party data, or maybe it's not organized in a way where I can actually track what they're doing or draw insights from them. So then you have the data and tech folk, right, who will come in and work with that client to solve that problem. Am I not using the current technology which exists to create great experiences when you bring consumer experience people, right? Is my journey on the marketplace, on an e-commerce retail marketplace getting broken? Then you bring in the e-commerce specialists, right? Is my communication really personalized and tailored to what you're doing at this point in time? No. So maybe I need to bring in people who can help create that kind of communication. So it really depends on what we want. So which is why today's model is, and it is evolving, but that's the way to go. You need deep specialism, but in many more areas than you did 5 years ago, and it will become even more.
Okay.
And at the same time, you need people who have a holistic view of the entire business, who know what talent to pick to solve
what
a
problem.
right problem. They'll be the leaders of these kind of businesses.
Right. Interesting. Now, WPP has benefited from the rising tide of a recovering ad industry. I think fastest growth in 20 years.
Yeah.
So GroupM obviously has a significant share of that. Now that we're coming back to normalcy on some counts, what kind of growth are you looking at for 2022?
That differs market by market, but we still see huge double-digit growth continuing and us growing similarly. And this is not just bounce back, because the biggest impact during the pandemic was amongst companies that were not prepared for e-commerce, and many of the different sectors of businesses, B2B, etc. So what has happened is that obviously with the ones who didn't have e-commerce capability pivoted really fast and built those. So they built alternate channels to sell things to the consumers. The demand for FMCG was always there. Yes, there was some pressure on the bottom line because of supply chain, inflation, various other issues during then. But that demand was always there and continues to be there, right? So, and they have now built new skills. So that pandemic or no pandemic, they can still carry on doing that. There's also a huge amount of new money which has come into the market. So a lot of people keep saying, oh, this is just a bounce back and it will again fall.
Yeah.
But the fact is that, again, it differs market to market. But if I look at the market here, for instance, 20% of it is new money. Because the pandemic has also given, remember, a massive fillip to digital businesses. They were just better prepared to serve customers at that time, and there is massive amounts of new investment which has come in. Some were startups which have scaled, retail businesses of all kinds, people doing, everywhere you turn there are startups experimenting with something new, right? And while the initial part of the business is always built within those digital platforms, and some of them therefore do that kind of work themselves, the moment they want to scale, they come to people like us, right? So I would say that 20% of that money is new money which was never there before the pandemic, right? And this will only accelerate in the next 4-5 years as our economies undergo this kind of digital transformation. So it's not a bounce back. I would say that it's a fundamental shift that the world has taken, and there are bound to be many, many more opportunities because of that. It's a great time for entrepreneurs to come up with new ideas, and you can see that happening all the time. So I would, and also India's baseline has been low, because I used to do this comparison when I started doing a global role is, so the Chinese ad market is maybe when we set up GroupM here, was maybe about 2 to 3 times India, right? But by 2013-14, it had become 6 times larger. And I think the only difference that one could see why that was so much larger and therefore the ad spend as a percentage of GDP was higher was because the Chinese economy was very driven by manufacturing and building of domestic Chinese brands. Who first built them within China and then like Huawei, etc., went global, right? So, and therefore there was great need for brand awareness and recognition and all of that, right? And the infrastructure is there. So there were 6 times the number of marketers. So it's as simple as that. Whereas in India, a lot of the economic growth is driven by the services sector, B2B. Right? So on the B2B, you have a limited, and therefore, if you look at the top 100 spenders dominated by FMCG companies, right? So that was a fundamental difference between here and there. So therefore, the market was limited because we were not driven by manufacturing and new brand creation, whereas China was. So now I think that's the second part of that opportunity. If so many platform businesses are being created in India, which are consumer facing, there will be need for brand recognition, right? So we are now going to enter that phase that China went through 10 years ago, right? And therefore the market will expand, GDP, the ad spend as a percentage of GDP is going to keep growing.
Super. So maybe inch closer to China, perhaps overtake them, and may you beat your own records in growth in the coming year. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.